Knowing yourself is one of the hardest, yet most important, tasks in life. Most people think they already know who they are, but they really don't. They know their name, their likes and dislikes, maybe their job, but not the deeper structure of their being, their fears, their weaknesses, their untapped potential. To truly know yourself, you must be willing to face the parts of you that you prefer to avoid. You have to look honestly at your life, at your habits, and at your choices without hiding behind excuses. Self-awareness begins with honesty because without truth, you cannot build a real understanding of who you are. Many people live their entire lives behind masks, pretending to be what they think others want them to be. They shape their actions around approval and comfort rather than authenticity. But the moment you choose to see yourself clearly without the filters of pride or fear, you begin the process of transformation. Honesty is uncomfortable because it demands that you acknowledge your weaknesses, your mistakes, and the areas where you've failed to live up to your potential. Yet, that discomfort is necessary. It's a signal that you are facing reality instead of running from it. When you decide to be honest with yourself, you stop blaming the world for your problems and start examining your role in them. You start asking questions that require courage to answer. Why do I act the way I do? Why do I avoid certain situations or people? What patterns keep repeating in my life? These questions may not have pleasant answers, but they are the gateway to growth. Self-awareness begins the moment you stop lying to yourself about who you are and start recognizing who you've actually become through your choices. This process doesn't happen overnight. It's built through constant reflection and a willingness to face the truth, even when it hurts. Being honest with yourself also means admitting that you are capable of both good and bad. It's easy to believe you're always the victim or the hero in your own story, but reality is far more complex. You have moments of selfishness, anger, jealousy, and fear. Accepting these sides of yourself doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The more you deny your darker traits, the more power they gain over you. When you bring them into the light through honesty, you start to understand them and gain control over them. That's the foundation of true self-awareness, the ability to see yourself completely, not just the parts you like. Honesty also requires humility. You must accept that there are things you don't know and ways in which you've been wrong. People often protect their egos by refusing to admit fault, but that only traps them in ignorance. When you are humble enough to say, "I was wrong," or "I don't understand," you open the door to learning. Humility doesn't mean weakness, it's the strength to confront your limitations and work beyond them. Through humility, you begin to see life as a process of constant improvement rather than a performance for others. Finally, self-awareness through honesty brings a sense of clarity. It removes the fog of denial and confusion that clouds judgment. When you tell yourself the truth, you begin to see patterns in your behavior that explain why your life is the way it is. You realize that change is possible, but only through facing what's real. The honest person doesn't run from flaws. They confront them and use them as a guide for personal growth. In this way, honesty becomes the mirror that reveals the truth, and that truth becomes the first step toward genuine self-understanding. Observation reveals your true nature because it allows you to see yourself from a distance, almost as if you were studying another person. When you begin to observe your actions, words, and thoughts without judgment, you start to notice patterns that have always been there, but went unseen. Every emotion, every reaction, and every habit is a clue to who you truly are inside. For instance, when you feel anger, jealousy, or sadness, these emotions are not random. They are signals that point toward deeper truths about your fears, desires, and values. Observation is like turning a light on in a dark room. Suddenly you can see what has been there all along. Most people move through life unconsciously, reacting automatically to situations without understanding why they do so. They blame circumstances or other people for how they feel without realizing that their internal reactions are shaped by their own unresolved conflicts or beliefs. By learning to step back and watch yourself, you gain insight into the forces driving your behavior. You begin to notice that the things you criticize in others often reflect the things you dislike in yourself. This kind of awareness is not comfortable, but it is powerful because it gives you the ability to change. You can only transform what you can see. What remains hidden controls you without your knowledge. To observe yourself properly, you must develop patience and honesty. You cannot rush self-understanding, and you cannot fake it. Spend time reflecting on how you respond to different situations. When you get defensive, ask yourself why. When you feel anxious, question what you're afraid of losing. When you feel proud, notice what kind of recognition you're seeking. Every emotion is a doorway into your deeper self. Through this process, You stop being a prisoner of your impulses and start becoming the observer of your own life. This perspective gives you emotional distance, the ability to pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Observation also teaches you humility because you realize that you are not as consistent or as logical as you might believe. You notice contradictions in your behavior, times when your actions don't match your values or when your words are kinder than your thoughts. These moments can be unsettling, but they are essential for growth. The more honestly you observe yourself, the more you understand what motivates you. You begin to recognize which habits are helpful and which ones sabotage your progress. This kind of self-knowledge cannot be taught by anyone else. It must come from your own awareness, your own willingness to look within. The power of observation lies in its ability to reveal the truth without distortion. When you observe rather than judge, you start to accept yourself as you are. You see your strengths and weaknesses clearly without exaggerating or denying them. Over time, this awareness leads to self-control and maturity. You stop being surprised by your emotions because you understand where they come from. You begin to act with more intention, guided not by impulse but by insight. Through careful observation, life stops feeling random and begins to make sense. Each experience, no matter how small, becomes a mirror reflecting who you truly are. Courage to confront your darkness is one of the most difficult yet transformative steps in truly knowing yourself. Every person carries within them parts they would rather hide, feelings of anger, jealousy, fear, guilt, or shame. These are the shadows of the human psyche, the aspects we suppress because they make us uncomfortable or because we believe they make us unworthy. But the truth is, what we avoid does not disappear, it grows stronger in the dark. The longer we deny our negative emotions or impulses, the more power they gain over our lives. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face what frightens you, especially when that fear comes from within. Facing your inner darkness means being willing to look at the parts of yourself you'd rather not see. It requires admitting that you are capable of wrongdoing, that you have selfish desires, that you've made mistakes, and that some of your pain comes from your own actions. Most people prefer to project these flaws onto others, blaming society, circumstances, or specific individuals for their suffering. But real growth begins when you stop running from the truth and recognize that your own shadow plays a role in your struggles. Only then can you begin to change it. This confrontation is not an act of punishment, but an act of understanding. You are not supposed to hate your darkness, you are supposed to learn from it. Every negative emotion holds a message. Anger might reveal a boundary you've allowed others to cross. Envy might show you what you truly desire but have been too afraid to pursue. Fear might be pointing you toward something important that requires your attention. When you have the courage to sit with these emotions and ask what they are trying to teach you, you transform them into sources of strength rather than weakness. Many people fear this process because they believe that if they acknowledge their darker nature, they will become it. But the opposite is true. The darkness only controls you when you refuse to acknowledge it. Once you confront it directly, you rob it of its power. You begin to understand why you react the way you do, why certain people or situations trigger you, and how you can respond differently. This understanding leads to integration, the process of becoming whole. You stop being divided between the person you show to the world and the person you hide within. Instead, you become authentic, grounded, and more compassionate toward yourself and others. Confronting your darkness also builds resilience. When you face your fears, shame, or pain head on, you realize that you are stronger than you thought. You discover that the very experiences you avoided are the ones that can teach you the most about strength and courage. The process isn't easy. It often involves emotional discomfort, vulnerability, and even moments of despair. But beyond that struggle lies freedom, the freedom to live without pretense, without fear of your own mind. To know yourself fully, you must walk through your own shadows and bring light into them. Only through that act of courage do you uncover your true power and depth. Reflection and responsibility shape identity because they allow you to take ownership of your life and understand how your actions define who you are. Every choice you make, every word you speak, and every habit you repeat becomes part of the person you are becoming. Reflection helps you see these patterns clearly, while responsibility gives you the power to change them. Without reflection, life passes in a blur of events, and you never stop to question why things happen or how you contribute to them. Without responsibility, even when you see the truth, you remain powerless to act on it. Together, reflection and responsibility form the foundation of personal growth and self-awareness. Reflection begins with stillness. It requires you to pause, to look back honestly at your experiences, and to ask what they reveal about you. Through reflection, you can see how your past choices have shaped your present circumstances. You notice how certain decisions, habits, and attitudes have led you to where you are today. This understanding can be both painful and liberating. It's painful because it exposes your mistakes and missed opportunities, but it's liberating because it shows that your life is not random. It's the result of choices you made, which means you can make new choices to shape a different future. Reflection is not about regret, it's about learning. It transforms experiences into wisdom. Responsibility takes that wisdom and turns it into action. Once you recognize your role in your own story, you can no longer hide behind excuses or blame others for everything that goes wrong. Taking responsibility means accepting that your actions, thoughts, and attitudes have real consequences. It doesn't mean you are guilty for everything that happens to you, but it means you acknowledge your power to influence your life. Many people avoid responsibility because it's heavy. It means you have no one else to blame when things fall apart. But that same weight gives you strength because it reminds you that you are capable of change. The moment you take ownership of your life, you stop being a victim and start being the author of your own story. Reflection and responsibility together help you build integrity. They force you to align your actions with your values, to live in a way that matches what you believe to be right. When you fail to reflect, you lose sight of your direction. When you refuse responsibility, you lose control of your destiny. But when you practice both, you create inner order. You start to see that your behavior either moves you closer to your potential or further away from it. Each day becomes an opportunity to correct your course, to act with more awareness and purpose. Taking responsibility also deepens your connection with others. When you admit your mistakes and learn from them, you build trust. People respect those who can own their flaws and work to improve them. It takes strength to say, "I was wrong," and even greater strength to act differently afterward. Reflection helps you see the truth, responsibility helps you live it. The more you practice both, the clearer your identity becomes, not as something fixed, but as something you continually shape through awareness, honesty, and conscious effort. Growth comes from truth, not perfection. Because the real measure of a person is not how flawless they appear, but how honest they are with themselves. Perfection is an illusion that traps people in endless self-criticism and comparison, while truth opens the door to understanding and progress. When you chase perfection, you focus on how you look to others, constantly trying to meet unrealistic standards. But when you seek truth, you focus on what is real, your actual strengths, weaknesses, emotions, and choices. Truth invites humility. It reminds you that you are a work in progress, that life is a process of learning rather than performing. People often hide behind the desire to be perfect because it feels safer than being honest. If you can convince yourself that you're flawless, you don't have to face your failures or confront your insecurities. Yet, that illusion only delays growth. The truth is that every mistake, every flaw, and every failure carries within it the potential for transformation. You cannot improve what you refuse to see, and you cannot heal what you pretend doesn't exist. Growth begins the moment you stop lying to yourself and start seeing your life as it really is. It is not an act of shame to recognize your imperfections, it is an act of courage. When you live truthfully, you stop expecting life to be smooth and easy. You understand that difficulty and failure are essential teachers. The truth often hurts at first. It reveals where you've fallen short, where you've been dishonest, or where you've been lazy. But once you accept it, it becomes your guide. It tells you what needs to change and where you need to direct your effort. People who embrace truth grow faster because they no longer waste time defending their egos. Instead of pretending to be right, they seek to become better. That mindset leads to genuine progress and emotional strength. Truth also builds resilience. When you stop hiding from reality, you become adaptable. You can face problems without falling apart because you no longer rely on illusions for comfort. You start to see failure not as proof that you're worthless, but as evidence that you're learning. The more truth you can face, the more you expand your capacity for growth. Every truth you accept about yourself becomes a foundation for wisdom and maturity. You begin to value honesty over approval, effort over image, and progress over perfection. Living by truth also brings a deep sense of peace. Perfectionism keeps you anxious because it demands constant performance and comparison. Truth, on the other hand, allows you to breathe. It tells you that it's enough to be sincere, to keep trying, to keep learning. It frees you from the impossible expectation of being flawless and replaces it with the achievable goal of being authentic. Growth does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming real. Someone who sees themselves clearly, admits their flaws, learns from them, and continues moving forward with integrity. When truth becomes your focus, every experience, even failure, becomes part of your evolution into a stronger, wiser, and more grounded person. Self-knowledge is built through action because you do not truly understand yourself by thinking or dreaming alone. You discover who you are by what you do, by how you respond to challenges, and by the choices you make each day. Many people believe they can find themselves through endless reflection, but without action, reflection becomes a trap of overthinking. You only understand your strengths when you test them, and you only learn your limits when you push against them. Action reveals truth. It exposes the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. It shows you your character not through words but through behavior. When you take responsibility for your life and begin to act with intention, you start to see what kind of person you are under pressure. It's easy to imagine yourself as disciplined, kind, or brave when everything is comfortable. But when life challenges you, when obstacles appear, and when things don't go as planned, your real character is revealed. These moments are not punishments but opportunities for understanding. They show you where you still need to grow. Every time you act, you create evidence of your identity. The person who avoids difficulty becomes weaker. The person who faces it gains strength. Action also transforms knowledge into wisdom. Reading, reflecting, and talking about growth can inspire you, but until you apply those ideas to real situations, they remain theories. If you decide to be honest, you must practice honesty in your relationships, even when it's uncomfortable. If you decide to be disciplined, you must act with consistency, even when you don't feel motivated. Every action is a test of your sincerity. Each time you follow through, you strengthen your sense of identity and integrity. You stop living as someone who merely talks about change and start living as someone who creates it. Through action, you also confront resistance. You realize that every meaningful goal brings struggle and discomfort. This friction is necessary because it forces you to confront your weaknesses and doubts. You might fail, you might fall short, but those experiences teach you more about yourself than success ever could. Failure is not the opposite of growth, it is part of it. Each setback reveals what skills you need to improve and what attitudes you need to change. Over time, as you keep taking action, you develop resilience, the ability to stand up again and again, no matter how many times you fall. That resilience becomes a mirror of your true self. Living with purpose through action also brings clarity. You begin to see what truly matters to you and what doesn't. You stop chasing meaningless approval and start building a life aligned with your values. Each decision, no matter how small, becomes an expression of your character. When you act with courage, honesty, and consistency, you shape yourself into someone dependable and strong. The process never ends because self-knowledge is not a destination but a journey. You keep learning who you are through every challenge, every choice, and every act of responsibility. In this way, action becomes the living proof of your identity and the most powerful tool for understanding yourself. The journey to knowing yourself is not a single moment of realization, but a lifelong process of honesty, courage, and action. It demands that you face your truth without fear, observe your thoughts without denial, and take responsibility for your choices without excuses. Self-awareness is not built in comfort. It grows through struggle, reflection, and the willingness to confront the parts of you that need change. When you stop chasing perfection and start living truthfully, you begin to align your life with purpose and authenticity. The more you act with integrity and self-discipline, the clearer your identity becomes. Knowing yourself means becoming the author of your own story, aware, responsible, and strong enough to turn every experience, both painful and joyful, into wisdom. In that process, you don't just discover who you are, you become who you are meant to be.